We know the story of his miraculous birth, and we know the story of his world-changing ministry and his ultimate sacrifice. The Gospels of the New Testament give us the divine biography of one of the most pivotal figures in all of history, Jesus of Nazareth. They chart his lineage, describe the cosmic events surrounding his arrival, and meticulously document the final 3 years of his life. It was a period of profound teaching, miraculous works, and a revolution of the human spirit that still echoes in our world today. But for all their detail, the Gospels are curiously silent for 18 full years. From the time he was a boy of 12, wowing the learned teachers in the great Jerusalem temple, to the man of 30 who showed up at the Jordan River to be baptized, history just has a gap. The narrative simply stops, leaving behind a deep and tantalizing silence. It's one of history's greatest mysteries. What happened during the lost years of Jesus? Where did he go? What did he do? And why do the Gospels, our main sources for his life, say almost nothing about this entire formative period? This 18-year silence has become a blank canvas for centuries of speculation, myth, and intense debate. Did he live a quiet, normal life in his hometown, or did he set off on epic journeys to the farthest corners of the world? In this investigation, we're going to decode the hidden life of the Messiah. We'll journey from the dusty workshops of Galilee to the mystical monasteries of the Himalayas, from the desolate caves of the Dead Sea to the very heart of the historical debate. We're going to explore the plausible, the possible, and the outright fabricated, all in an effort to piece together the puzzle of Jesus' lost years. The answers we find might just challenge what you think you know, and the mystery itself might reveal more than any single theory ever could. To really get the mystery of the lost years, we have to go back to the last time the Bible gives us a clear snapshot of the young Mave Jesus. It's a story you'll only find in the Gospel of Luke. Every year, his parents, Mary and Joseph, made the pilgrimage from their home in Nazareth to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. When Jesus was 12, he went with them. Picture it. The city would have been teeming with a vibrant mix of faith, commerce, and Roman soldiers. After the festival was over, his family started the long trip home with a big caravan of relatives and friends from Nazareth. Luke tells us they traveled for a full day before it hit them. Jesus was UNT with them. It's every parent's worst nightmare. They turned back frantically searching for him among their family and friends. For 3 agonizing days, they retraced their steps, their anxiety surely growing with every hour. Finally, they found him, not lost in some market, not wandering the streets, but sitting in the Jerusalem temple, the very center of Jewish religious life. And he wasn't just watching, he was right in the middle of a deep theological discussion. He was sitting among the great teachers, the experts in the law, listening to them and, unbelievably, asking them questions. Luke notes that everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his frantic mother finally confronted him asking, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been worried sick looking for you." His reply was cryptic, the first recorded words that hint at his unique mission. "Why were you looking for me? Didn't you know that I must be in my father's house?" This event is our anchor. It tells us a few crucial things about the young Jesus. At just 12, he had a startling wisdom and a deep grasp of scripture that floored the religious elites. He already felt a powerful connection to God, who he called his Father, and a sense of divine purpose that was even more important than his family. This was no ordinary kid. And then, right after this incredible moment, the narrative goes quiet. Luke gives us just one tantalizing verse to cover the next 18 years, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature, and in favor with God and man. He went back to Nazareth with his parents and was obedient to them, and that's it. For nearly 2 decades, the curtain falls. The silence is deafening, and it's this silence that has given birth to a world of questions and a whole lot of theories. Before we dive into exotic journeys and secret societies, we have to start with the most widely accepted theory, the one held by the vast majority of mainstream Christian scholars and historians. It's a theory based on history, culture, and a quiet reading of the Bible, and it suggests that Jesus didn't go anywhere extraordinary. He just went home. He lived the life of a first-century man in the small, quiet town of Nazareth. The Gospels call Jesus a carpenter and the carpenter's son. The Greek word used is tekton now. We usually translate it as carpenter, but its meaning is broader, more like a craftsman, builder, or artisan. A tekton would have worked with wood, but also stone, sort of like a general contractor of the ancient world. Nazareth was a tiny village, probably only a few hundred people, but it was in a great location. Just a few miles away was the bustling cosmopolitan city of Sepphoris, which Herod Antipas was lavishly rebuilding during Jesus' youth. It's almost certain that a skilled tekton like Joseph and his apprentice son Jesus would have found work on this massive construction project. Imagine a young Jesus walking that road from Nazareth to Sepphoris, not as a divine figure, but as a young man going to work. There, he wouldn't have been in a purely Jewish bubble. Sepphoris was a thoroughly modern, Romanized city. It had a huge theater, fancy streets, and a diverse crowd of Jews, Romans, and other Gentiles. This environment would have exposed Jesus to Greek language, Roman culture, and a bigger worldview than his small village could offer. This might be where he developed his amazing ability to connect with people from all walks of life. From poor fishermen to Roman centurions, his life would have been one of tough, physical labor. He would have been strong, with calloused hands, used to the Galilean sun and dust. This image shatters the often soft, ethereal depictions of Jesus we see in Western art. This was a man of the earth, a worker who got the daily struggles of common people because he was one of them. Beyond his job, his life would have been steeped in his Jewish faith. That scene in the temple at age 12 wasn't a fluke. It was the sign of a devout and brilliant young man. Back in Nazareth, his education would have continued. He would have gone to the local synagogue, learning to read and study the Hebrew scriptures, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. The masterful way he used scripture in his later ministry shows a lifetime of study. He didn't just know the words, he understood their deepest meaning and could use them with an authority that was second to none. This was also a time of deep personal and spiritual growth. Jewish tradition held that a man wasn't seen as a mature teacher or rabbi until he was 30. So these silent years weren't wasted time. They were years of patient preparation. He was living a fully human life. He would have known the joys and sorrows of family, the bonds of community, and the political pressures of living under Roman occupation. The Gospels don't mention his father, Joseph, during his public ministry, leading most scholars to believe Joseph died sometime during these hidden years. If that's true, Jesus, as the eldest son, would have become the head of the household, responsible for his mother, Mary, and his younger brothers and sisters. That kind of responsibility would have grounded him, shaping his understanding of duty, sacrifice, and love. According to this mainstream view, the Gospels are silent about these years for one simple reason. Their goal wasn't to write a Davide biography. Their goal was to proclaim a theological truth about his public ministry, death, and resurrection. The years in Nazareth weren't lost. They were just private. There were years of quiet obedience, of growth, of waiting for the right time to begin his real work. He was hiding in plain sight, a craftsman from an obscure village, a Messiah in waiting, being prepared not in some secret monastery but in the ordinary fabric of human life. While the life of a Galilean carpenter is the most probable scenario, it's definitely not the most famous or sensational theory about Jesus' lost years. Not by a long shot. For over a century, a captivating and highly controversial story has circulated that sends Jesus far from home on a spiritual pilgrimage to the mystical heartlands of the East, India, Nepal, and Tibet. This theory exploded into the Western world in 1894 with a book by a Russian journalist and adventurer named Nicholas Notovich. The book was called The Unknown Life of Jesus Christ. In it, Notovich made a jaw-dropping claim. He said that while traveling in the Himalayas in 1887, was recovering from a broken leg in the remote Hemis monastery in Ladakh, a region of Tibet. While there, the chief lama supposedly shared with him an ancient manuscript about a holy man named Saint Isa. According to the text Notovich claimed he had translated, the story of Isa was shockingly familiar. The manuscripts allegedly told of a divine child born in Israel. At age 13, instead of getting married as was the custom, Isa left home and traveled with a merchant caravan to the east, hoping to study the laws of the great Buddhas. The life of Saint Isa describes a grand spiritual tour. Isa supposedly spent time in Punjab and with a Guru. Then he traveled to Jagannath, where Brahmin priests welcomed him, and he spent 6 years studying the sacred Hindu texts, the Vedas. But, the text claims, he clashed with the Brahmins over the caste system, teaching that God doesn't distinguish between people. Because of this, he had to flee. Isa then supposedly went to Nepal and into the Himalayas of Tibet. There, he spent another 6 years in Buddhist monasteries, mastering their sacred texts. Finally, at age 29, Isa began his journey home to Judea, where he began his ministry and was eventually executed by a governor named Pilate. The name Isa is, of course, a lot like Isa. The name for Jesus in the Quran. Notovich's book was an instant sensation and a massive controversy for the growing spiritualist movements of the late 19th century. This was the missing link proof of a universal spirituality connecting East and West. The theory has been championed ever since by New Age thinkers and those looking for an alternative to Orthodox Christianity. However, from the moment it was published, the story was hit with a mountain of criticism from mainstream scholars. The renowned expert on Eastern religions, Max Muller, publicly called it out, suggesting Notovich had either been pranked by the monks or just made the whole thing up. The story seemed suspiciously tailored for a Western audience, full of errors about both Buddhist and Hindu philosophy. Crucially, Jesus' actual teachings in the Gospels show no trace of core Eastern concepts like reincarnation or karma. His worldview is thoroughly rooted in first-century Jewish belief. The most damning evidence, though, came when investigators actually went to the Hemis monastery in 1895. A professor named J. Archibald Douglas visited and spoke with the head lama, who had been in charge during Notovich's supposed visit. He confirmed Notovich had been there, but for a toothache, not a broken leg. More importantly, the Lama flatly denied ever showing him any manuscript about Saint Isa and said no such document had ever existed in their library, calling the book a lie. Faced with this, several reports claim Notovich later confessed to the hoax. Despite being thoroughly debunked, the legend of Saint Isa refuses to die. The story is just too good. The idea of a young Jesus meditating in the Himalayas holds a powerful romantic appeal. But as biblical scholar Bart Ehrman summarizes the modern academic consensus, the story was invented by Notovich. While it makes for a fascinating tale, the journey to India remains firmly in the realm of 19th century fiction. If the journey to India is pure fantasy, our next theory is planted firmly in the sun-scorched earth of Judea itself. This theory links Jesus to one of the most mysterious Jewish groups of his time, the Essenes, and the intrigue got supercharged in the 1940s by one of the greatest archaeological discoveries ever, the Dead Sea Scrolls. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd was looking for a lost goat near the Dead Sea. He tossed a rock into a cave and heard pottery shatter. Inside he found ancient clay jars stuffed with scrolls. This accidental discovery at a site called Qumran eventually led to a whole library of over 900 manuscripts, preserved for nearly 2,000 years in the dry desert air. The scrolls gave us the oldest known copies of books from the Hebrew Bible, but they also contained sectarian documents nobody had ever seen, community rules, war plans, hymns, and prophecies. These texts gave us an incredible window into the beliefs of the community that wrote them. Most scholars believe this community was a sect known as the Essenes. The Essenes were a pious, ascetic group of Jews who had retreated from what they saw as the corrupt religious establishment in Jerusalem. They moved to the desert to live a life of ritual purity and intense devotion, believing they were the children of light preparing for a final battle against the children of darkness. They were waiting for one or possibly two messiahs to come and set things right. The parallels to the early Christian movement were so striking, it made everyone wonder, was Jesus an Essene? Or was he at least influenced by them during his lost years? When you look at the parallels, you can see why people get excited. Both John the Baptist and Jesus started their ministries in the Judean wilderness, right in the Essenes neighborhood. John's message of repentance and baptism, his simple lifestyle, and his apocalyptic preaching all sound very Essene-like. The Essenes practiced frequent ritual bathing for purification, and the ruins at Qumran are full of ritual baths. It's plausible John had contact with them. Since Jesus was baptized by John, some suggest that this was his way into an Essene-influenced world. Maybe Jesus spent some of his hidden years training with this desert community. Both Jesus and the Essenes were critical of the temple authorities in Jerusalem. Both used similar language and quoted from the same biblical books, especially Isaiah. However, for every similarity, there's a difference that's even more glaring. And these differences argue strongly against any formal connection. First, the Essenes were intense isolationists. They cut themselves off from society to protect their purity. Jesus, on the other hand, was radically inclusive. He was famous for eating with tax collectors and sinners, the very people the Essenes would have avoided. He touched lepers and healed the sick on the Sabbath, things that would have been unthinkable for a strict Essene. Second, the Essenes were incredibly legalistic. Their community rule lays out a life with a complex set of severe regulations. Jesus, while he respected the law, often challenged rigid interpretations of it, famously saying, "The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath." Third, the Essene worldview could be intensely militaristic. Their war scroll describes a final, violent, 40-year war between good and evil. Jesus' message, by contrast, was about non-violence and loving your enemies. His kingdom was not of this world. So, while Jesus was almost certainly aware of the Essenes and shared some of the same theological ideas floating around at the time, the evidence strongly suggests he wasn't one of them. The Dead Sea Scrolls are invaluable, not because they show Jesus was an Essene, but because they paint a much richer picture of the Jewish world he was born into. They show us that his ideas weren't happening in a vacuum. The Essenes provide fascinating context, but Jesus remains a unique and distinct voice. The human imagination hates a vacuum, and boy, did it rush to fill the 10-year gap in Jesus' life. Beyond the plausible carpenter and the grand theories, a whole host of other, more fantastical legends have sprung up. One of the most stubborn legends places a young Jesus not in the East, but way out west, in Britain. This story is tangled up with the lore of Joseph of Arimathea, the wealthy man who gave Jesus his tomb. According to medieval English legends, Joseph was a tin merchant whose trade routes brought him to Cornwall. And on one of these trips, the story goes, he brought his young great-nephew Jesus along with him. This legend is the inspiration for William Blake's famous poem "And Did Those Feet in Ancient Time." Now the hymn Jerusalem. It asks if Jesus walked on England's mountains green. The story often focuses on the town of Glastonbury, a place already steeped in Arthurian myth. Of course, there's zero historical evidence for this. The legend seems to have popped up more than 1,000 years later, likely to boost the reputation of Glastonbury Abbey and create a national origin myth for English Christianity. But if you think Britain is a stretch, our next stop is a small village in northern Japan called Shingo. Here, you can visit a site that local tradition claims is the tomb of Jesus Christ. According to this legend, the person crucified wasn't Jesus, but his brother, Jesus. They claim, escaped, traveled across Siberia and Alaska, and settled in Japan. There, he became a rice farmer, married, had 3 daughters, and lived to be 106. This story is based on a set of ancient texts that are widely considered a 1930s forgery. Unsurprisingly, this story is mostly a local tourist attraction. While these legends are fairly modern, the desire to fill in Jesus' childhood is ancient. Long before any of this, early Christians were writing their own stories, known as the Infancy Gospels. The most famous is the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, from the 2nd century. And this text presents a very different picture of young Jesus. Here, he is a child prodigy who is also dangerously powerful and kind of a brat. The stories are bizarre. In one, a young Jesus is making clay sparrows on the Sabbath. When someone scolds him, he claps his hands and commands the clay birds to fly away. In another, more disturbing story, a kid who bumps into him accidentally is struck dead by Jesus' curse. These stories were popular, but they were ultimately rejected from the Bible. Why? Because they showed a Jesus who was capricious and cruel. Total contradiction to the compassionate figure in the 4 official Gospels. Scholars now see these as a kind of ancient fan fiction. From Britain to Japan to these wild apocryphal tales, these legends tell us far more about the people who created them than they do about the historical Jesus. They show a universal desire to fill in the blanks and connect with this monumental figure on a more personal level. So after all this, where are we? We have chased the shadow of a young man from Nazareth across the globe and through the centuries. The grand theories, while exciting, just do not hold up. The story of St. Isa is understood by virtually all recognized scholars as a 19th century fabrication. The Essene theory is contradicted by the fundamental differences in their beliefs in Jesus' radical message of inclusion. And the legends of travels to Britain or Japan are pure folklore. And all of that brings us right back to where we started. A dusty little village in Galilee. The most historically sound and logical conclusion is that Jesus spent his lost years right there in and around Nazareth. He lived a life of a tekton, a craftsman, likely taking over the family business. He supported his family, was part of his community, and studied the scriptures. He lived a normal, fully human life, with a growing inner sense of a world-changing destiny. The silence of the Gospels is not a cover-up. It's a reflection of the fact that for 18 years, Jesus lived a private life of quiet preparation. But maybe the deepest question is not what happened, but why the Gospels are silent. Why leave such a huge part of his life blank? The answer probably lies in the purpose of the Gospels themselves. They were not meant to be modern biographies obsessed with every detail from cradle to grave. They were theological proclamations, written to convince people that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of God, whose death and resurrection offered salvation. From that point of view, his teenage years were less important than his public message. Yet, there's a profound spiritual truth in the silence itself. This period of obscurity sanctifies the ordinary. It tells us that the divine is found not just in the spectacular, but in the mundane rhythm of daily work, family duties, and patient waiting. For 18 years, the Son of God lived a life that looked just like his neighbors. He knew the sweat of labor, the bonds of family, and the quiet rhythm of faith in a small town. This hidden time was not an absence of purpose. It was a different kind of purpose. It was incarnation in the truest sense, God fully entering the human experience. When Jesus finally appeared at the Jordan River at age 30, he did not speak from some detached, otherworldly place. He spoke as someone who had lived among the people, who understood their struggles and their hopes because he had shared them. The authority of his teaching was forged not just in heaven, but in the workshop of Nazareth. The lost years are not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to embrace. They are a powerful reminder that most of life is lived away from the spotlight. They teach us that years of obscurity are not empty. They are formative. They are the soil where wisdom grows, character is forged, and purpose becomes clear. In the end, those 18 silent years make the 3 years of public ministry that followed even more explosive. It was precisely because he had spent that time in quiet, human obedience that his emergence as the Messiah carried such earth-shattering power. The carpenter from Nazareth stepped out of the workshop and onto the world stage, fully prepared. His time finally at hand. The world has never been the same. What do you think happened during Jesus' lost years? Which theory do you find most compelling? Or do you think the silence itself holds the most meaning? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd read every single one. And if you enjoyed decoding the greatest mysteries of history and faith, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do not miss our next investigation. Thanks for watching.